You know how somebody normally says what had happened was, and that's not normally a good introduction to anything? Well, this series is going to dispel that myth and end that stigma. What had happened was is a series where I, Justin Reeves of the JR Group, will have a chance to go behind the scenes with you, the viewers and the people watching, hopefully other creatives, other business people, other aspiring creatives and business people, who just want to know how some of your favorite events, some of your favorite programs, some of your favorite whatever actually came to be. So we'll talk about concerts that I've worked, tours that I've managed, events that I've done, books that I've helped to write, all sorts of things. Right? Your boy is really a producer of all things. I've just all sorts of stuff. So I'm gonna have a time to just really dig deep. And so the first one up, drum roll please. This is why I need one of my drumming people in my life to be here. Up first, that we're going to talk about what happened is Jasmine Sims' first solo tour, the Garden Live Experience, or the Garden Experience Live. No, it was the Jasmine Sims Live presents the Garden Experience. I don't think there was a presents there. I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna put the flyer up on the screen. The magic of editing. But so this was Jasmine Sims' first solo tour, and to be honest, the date of this video comes out will actually commemorate the 1 year anniversary of the very first show of the tour last year. So this is really special. I'm also wearing pink and green, which was part of her floral color palette. Like we'll talk about all of that today. But yeah, so I met Jasmine in 2022. We were both on the Poets and Autumn tour. I was a tour manager of the Poets and Autumn tour, and she was one of the artists, one of the spoken word artists on the tour. And we'll talk about Poets and Autumn another day. But right now, I wanted to focus on Jasmine's first solo tour and really my first solo tour, if you think about it. And so if you think about it and you're doing the math and you're paying attention, you're probably like, you just said you met her in 2022 and you were the tour manager. And then you said this is the 1 year anniversary. So that would be 2024. You are correct. In 2022 and 2023, I was a tour manager for Poets in Autumn as well as We Need to Talk, which was a new brand that Ezekiel launched as well. But in 2024, I was Jasmine's tour manager. So what was the biggest difference? Well, to start off, the biggest difference is that from 2022 and 2023, Ezekiel was my source of escalation. Like if there was a question I didn't know the answer to, if there was something that I didn't know how to solve, I could always go to him because he was the chief producer of the show. He was the one running the entire thing, right? Like it was Ezekiel's show. And I was the tour manager, making sure things happen, but ultimately creative direction and approach and like the actual execution of the tour was on him. It was his tour. But this tour was different because there was no Ezekiel. It was just me and Jasmine. So Jasmine being the artist, the visionary, the creative director, all the titles that you want to give her. I think I said the artist, the spoken word artist, the only one on the flyer. As a little joke that we had, she was like, "I'm making this flyer and it's only me on it." Or like when we would go to shows, she would be like, "What are all those people out there for?" And I'd be like, "You." And she's like, "That's crazy." Whatever. Imposter syndrome, just crazy. Well, she always says if people are being crazy, it's crack. So in that case, it was crack. But yeah, so super. It was pivotal for both of us because both of us were doing this solo. So what does that really mean for me, right, from the behind the scenes perspective? It means that there was no initiator of the tour besides myself and Jasmine, right? Like she was able to get a sponsor. Which was Pitt's Mortuary, was the sponsor, and they provided the full sum total that we did everything on the tour budget. I basically told Jasmine we had a meeting back in November of 2023, and I had a Google form. I was really excited because nobody had ever filled it out before except for her. And so when she filled it out, it was like, "So you want to go on tour?" And it had her answer a series of questions that I had garnered from the past 2 years of me doing shows on the road and being a tour manager and working with other people and gaining information. And so she filled it out. And one of the things I told her is that when you have $10,000, come back and see me, and then we can promote, we can do this tour, we can make it happen. And so Jasmine, being a very um, dedicated individual and like persistent, she asked around, and I guess her aunt said that she would sponsor, and lo and behold, $10,000 later, I said, well, I said $10,000, we're going on tour. We got the money, we got whatever. So for me, what did I have to do? I had to do some of everything. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I should have phrased that as I got to do some of everything. It was my honor. It was my joy. It was what I wanted to do, right? And so it was organizing the cities, right? One of the best things, and what I would tell anybody who wants to work with somebody on their vision, really learn quickly if you can mesh with that individual, because things will get hard. And the good news is, because I already had a foundation with Jasmine from being on the road for 22 cities straight in 2022, and then 2023, which was a year that we'll speak of another time. um, because of that, we already had a bond, right? And we remained friends after the tour. We texted from time to time, so like we actually had a relationship. So I got to know her, and I learned that she was somebody who was very serious about her craft. So when she said she's going on tour, like the only thing that was in the way was the finances. Once we had the finances, there were to be no other roadblocks. So if I was to see roadblocks, I needed to find a way to move them, because otherwise she was going to move them. Here's the one thing about working with artists, though: artists don't always know how to move the roadblocks in the best way. And this is no shade to them, no slam to them. I love working with artists. Like, truly, it's a joy of mine. If you're an artist out there and you want a tour manager, you want an event producer, an event curator, hit me up. I'm your guy. Just, I'm going to put something down here to hit me up at. Um, but a lot of times artists are just really focused on the art and the actual execution of the show. They're not focused on the details. That's where people like us come in. And I have the joy of being a hybrid creative. I have a strong logistical mind, but I also have a budding creative mind, right? Like I can create my own shows, but I also can just make somebody else's dream come true. So this was an opportunity for me to make her dream come true, and I really enjoyed that. So let's skip through all that. So what did we do? We decided what cities we wanted to go to. When you're going on tour, come close. When you're going on tour, make sure people want you to come. I just and in these episodes, I just want to talk through all like the lessons and the things that just that we all need to do better with this kind of stuff. When you're going on tour, your first solo tour where you're the only person on the bill and there's not a promoter behind it, which there was no promoter. Let's back up there, okay? There was a tour manager for this show and the visionary. That was the main, like, overarching leadership of this tour, right? We definitely had other people who helped make this thing possible, and I will definitely mention them throughout this video because they are extremely uh, important to the success of this tour. But when it comes down to the leadership and the management of it, it was myself and Jasmine. There was no promoter. So what does a promoter mean? A promoter is somebody who generally will has good relationship with venues or an audience in a market, and tells them that they're, hey, I'm bringing the show to DC, for example. My name is Justin. I'm a promoter. I'm bringing the show to DC. That means I probably have some venue contacts. I probably got um, you know, audience there. I know how to work the marketing in that city. I know how to talk to radio personnel or churches or clubs or organizations or fraternities, sororities, whatever the case is, right? You know how to get to the people in that area, or you're willing to take the risk. We didn't have a promoter. So when you don't have a promoter, you need to go where your audience is. I think this is hitting the mic. I'm sorry if it's messing it up. And so one of the first things I told her was go on your Instagram analytics, because at that time she was popping on Instagram. So go to your Instagram analytics and show me where your top cities are, because we have $10,000 for this budget. We have to figure out how to split that $10,000 amongst the cities. And so we can't just go to, LA and London and Portugal, which is a country, not a city. We can't go to all these places. Lisbon would be the city in Portugal. Sorry, we can't go to all these cities on $10,000. So we need to figure out what are the places where we could sell out or get very close to selling out and have a good presence, because the goal originally was to do a second leg of the tour in the fall of 2024. That did not end up happening. Finances, it really was. So for me, when it comes to major cities to go on tour, DC is a big one. DC is a big one because even though DC is not a huge city, DC is sandwiched in between. It forms a metropolitan area of itself, and it's sandwiched in between Maryland and Virginia, which has huge populations of people. But pretty much no one, like, the only other places people go in Virginia for stops are like Richmond and Norfolk, and in Maryland it's like Baltimore. So pretty much if you go to DC, you're in the middle of all of those areas. So if you have any fans within Northern Virginia, Southern Maryland, even all the way to Baltimore sometimes, and down to Richmond, people will come to your show because they know, like, they're used to you saying the DC market includes all this stuff. People in West Virginia too will come because they don't have a lot of people coming to their to put on shows. So DC was a no-brainer. DC was also a no-brainer because I live there. What does that mean? That means that for a solo tour or any tour, any event, you want to go, like, if you're going places, you want to go places where your expenses will be reduced. So for every city, we had to get a venue, we had to get hotels, or and we had to have flights, we had to have transportation and food. Five major things in every city. But if you go to a city where somebody lives, we don't need a hotel here because I have a house. See, this is my house. It's got the Christmas tree still up. At some point, I will take this down. I promise. So, sorry. You got, here, I live here. So you don't have to worry about lodging in DC, right? Transportation, like, she and the team would have to fly into DC, but I don't. So that saves one flight for the budget, right? So you want to try to, like, when you're on a limited budget, which I'm so grateful for the 10K that was given for the tour, but in the world of touring, that is a limited budget. There's only so much that you can do with it in terms of cities. So you want to be able to stretch it. How do you stretch it? One of the best ways to stretch a budget is go places where you don't need a budget. So you don't need transportation here because I got a car. You don't need housing here because I got a house. I was able to house the entire team in my house. God has blessed me. I'm happy that my townhouse can fit a good amount of people. Jasmine always says he got two upstairs. Is basically I got a townhouse. It's got 3 floors, and it starts. The bottom level is like the basement. I call it a basement. It's not underground. And then you got like the main level is the second one, and then the actual living is on the third level. But anyway, so I was able to house everybody here. So that saved on the lodging, that saved on food, um, that saved on transportation, and it saved on flights. Same thing for her. She's in Milwaukee. Her aunt, one of the parameters of sponsorship, which is really important. We're hopefully I'll get to sponsorship. One of the parameters of the sponsorship was that we did a home show in Milwaukee. So Milwaukee was easy for her because same thing. She lives there. She doesn't have to pay for a place to stay, doesn't have to pay for transportation, none of that stuff. I had to get there, but that's only one person versus herself and Loria, who was traveling with Jasmine as well and traveling with us on the tour. So that was that's the thought process on like when to figure out where to go. So if you get mad about your favorite band not coming to your city, there are legitimate reasons why your favorite band or your artist or preacher or whatever else, like, there's a reason generally why they don't come. It could be a timing thing. It could also be radius clauses. So if you're someone like Tasha Cobbs, let's say for example, Tasha Cobbs might be booked to do a show in DC, and then part of the contract, the promoter might put in there that, hey, you can't do another show 30 miles of DC for the next 3 to 6 months. Why? They do that so that you create a demand when you come, because everyone probably wants. I don't know why I'm picking Tasha Cobbs, but she's pretty great. Break the chains. Not this chain though. Uh, so like everybody wants to hear Tasha Cobbs or Kiera or Doe or whoever. Just insert whoever. Chandler would be a great example of a radius clause. Everybody wants to hear Chandler Moore. Everybody wants to hear Kirk Franklin. So if they come to a city for, let's say, a date in it's March. In March, a lot of promoters will say, okay, cool, you came in March, so you can't be booked back in this region until like June or something like that. That way, it helps them with their competition. So that helps to prevent people saying, oh, I can't really go in March, but I'll go in April because he's going to be here in April. And then the first show doesn't really sell as well or whatever. Tax time, whatever. Cool. So that explains the picking portion. So we ended up picking Atlanta, because and Atlanta it's a huge area. Every time PIA has gone to Atlanta, it's sold out. Jasmine's audience is not necessarily Poets in Autumn, but there is crossover in there, right? And because Poets in Autumn the previous year did not make it to Atlanta, there's already a desire for that level of spoken word and like that art form to be there. So we went to Atlanta, we went to DC. DC was quite a story. We we originally were going to go to two places in DC. There was a let's say there was a church out in Waldorf, and then we had a coffee house booked in DC proper. And the DC proper show was on Friday, and then the church in Waldorf was going to be on Saturday. However, the church in Waldorf did not answer our emails, phone calls, text messages the week of the show. So therefore, we had to cancel the show, refund everybody their tickets, or move them to the DC show, which was great, but not great in a way because the DC venue only sat 50 people. And we were like trying to squeeze people in there because it was already almost sold out from just regular DC people coming. So now we're trying to fit the other, like, I think it was like 18 or 20 people from Waldorf into there, and anybody who's from this area knows that Waldorf is not necessarily close to DC, and it's on a Friday and traffic and blah 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 blah. So what had happened was there was a lot of mess in the tour, um, and it's just always that way. It's you the performers get on stage and they do a great job, but there's always something going on behind the scenes. It is because you're dealing with people, you're dealing with logistics, and you're dealing with stuff. So I want to try to speed through this. I don't want to make this incredibly too long. But so we did Atlanta, DC, Dallas, and then Philly, and then Milwaukee was the final. So we really wanted to go to LA. LA is just super expensive. It's a lot to fly to LA. It calls the tickets are high. Lodging is high, food is high, everything is high. The people are high in LA. So that was a lot. We wanted to do a Toronto stop, same thing. Like we wanted to do a New York stop. New York is extremely challenging to do shows in. To do like going to shows in New York is fun, right? You get to go on Broadway, you get to just go ride the subway, you get to go to all these places. Like actually producing a show in New York is so hard. The costs are exorbitant. They're just high at all times. It's just ridiculous. So the costs are high. Transportation is hard because no one drives in New York City because it's New York City. So you got to Uber everywhere. You got to do subway. The hotels, my lord, you would think everything is the Ritz Carlton. If you're gonna do a show in New York, you gotta have a big budget. That's all I got to say. And we didn't have the big budget. We had the budget that God desired for her to have for her first solo tour, and it was not a New York budget. So New York was also on the list, and people just kept saying, "Come to Florida," but like Florida is a big panhandle. So like, did you mean Miami, Orlando, or Tampa? So yeah. So yeah, hopefully I would love. And we were going to go to Houston, but that show canceled as well. But the rodeo was that weekend, so everybody had bought tickets for the rodeo. So lessons learned for the tour. I want to go through that because again, what had happened was I learned a lot. One of the first things, the positive thing I learned, is that I was capable of doing this without the oversight of somebody else. While I would love to continue to collaborate with other people, especially Ezekiel, you're my dog for life, for sure. If you ever watch this video, I would love to do another tour with you for real. But I now know that like I don't necessarily need that. I have the knowledge. I've learned enough, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I could have learned from Poets and Autumn the first year. We need to talk the next year. Poets and Autumn the next year as well to be able to do this because when you're serving somebody's vision, you're really helping them carry their baby, and babies are fragile. And this tour was fragile. So I'm glad I learned that. It was definitely a good confidence boost for me, which was necessary. I think the next thing that I learned that I realized that I didn't have to do previously was really establishing roles and responsibilities and the importance of that. Why do I say that? It is important and imperative to do that because any team needs to be a well-oiled machine. And I can honestly say our team was not. For a variety of reasons I won't necessarily go into in this video. Maybe I'll do a Patreon one day and just do a tell-all. That's actually really stupid. That's not edifying for anybody. But there were legitimate reasons there was friction on the team, but I think that could have been avoided. I really do. Now, working with creatives, being creative myself and other people being creative and more creative, working with people who are serious about their individual crafts is a blessing and it's a curse, because when you are serious about your particular craft, you have the tendency at times to think that your way and your perspective on the matter supersedes the overall vision. And if you think that you're the overall vision, you can think that the details don't matter to the vision, or in different ways. So I'm not like calling anybody out in particular, but I think that had we done um, more structured team meetings and more like delineated roles and responsibilities, even a document. Like I love a good Google Doc, but I think because we were friends for the most part, and still a lot of those relationships are still intact. But I think that we could have fared better in the end. Just facts. So my lesson to you, if you are a tour manager, also learn that as a tour manager, you're a catch-all for things too. Like you kind of end up being HR as well if there is no HR. So you've got to be able to listen to both sides and really figure out what is best for the people and the tour. And sometimes those are not the same thing. And then know how those consequences will affect the people and the tour. And be prayed up too. Like we joke about that all the time. Like, let Jesus take the wheel. Truly, let Jesus take the wheel of the tour, because otherwise, my Lord and my God. Um, so that's something big I would do. I anytime now, and now I put that in my own event. So like when I'm working with the band now, for example, and we'll get to that when we talk about my stuff. When I'm working with them, I'm like, okay, you're the MD, you're the one in charge of arrangements, you're the one just like play your instrument, and that's not shade to anybody, but it's just like just knowing what people do. You're the production manager, you're over graphics, you're over merchandise, you're over this. So you have the responsibility and the onus for those areas. And I think we had that, but it wasn't as clear as it needed to be. So that was another lesson. Next lesson, I can stretch a budget. I'm good at that. I don't desire to ever be poor, but I believe I can make some stuff happen. Lord, please don't put me to the test in Jesus' name. Amen. And to be clear, I said don't put me on the test. It was a hot mic. Next lesson, my handy dandy microphone. Oh, staffing. Always get more than what you think. I'd rather have people sitting around doing nothing on a tour stop than running around. One of the things I learned is I did not see a single show until the last show, and the last show was different. So like the venues were small enough that I heard everything that was happening, but there were times when I was a cameraman, I was letting people in, I was getting food, I was making sure stuff was happening and do like moving forward. And that's not a bad thing, but make sure that there's help. We always had volunteers, and I think volunteers are an important thing. People always want to get volunteers for shows. Just make sure a volunteer is doing what volunteers should do. I mean that seriously. And we're going to talk about that big when I talk about Acts 242, because I was part of that. Because I was the volunteer lead for Acts 242. But for Jasmine's shows, because again, I had done Poets and Autumn, We Need to Talk, we had I had a list of emails of everybody that had volunteered previously or signed up that they would volunteer. So I would just shoot a blast out a couple weeks before the show. Hey, you're in Atlanta. Would you volunteer for PAA or We Need to Talk before? Would you be interested in doing it now? If they said yes, in the email back, I had a link for them to sign up for a group me. Why is that important? I put the link in there to test people's comprehension. I'm not even trying to be funny right now, but like you need to know that your volunteers are competent. So like if there's a simple direction in your email that you're sending them and they overlook it, you probably don't want that person doing check-in or working with you handling your money. Just saying. Um Two, when they got into the group me, I would start talking to them. One of the things I learned, I just took a Gallup Strengths test this year, is that I'm a relator. I don't want volunteers to just feel like workers. We can't pay you, right? You're a volunteer, so by nature you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart and the kindness of your heart. That does not mean I want you to be work like a Hebrew slave. That's just not the case. I don't want that to be, but there is some work that needs to be done. So I want to make sure that beforehand we're talking about everything. hey, are you able to lift 40 pounds? Are you able to, come early? Are you able to be comfortable? Are you able to sacrifice possibly missing the show type of thing? Um, I just am a firm believer that you should treat your people right. And I've been in situations where I have not been treated right as a volunteer or a leader or staff member or even a leader at times. And I don't want that to ever be something that's said. I want people to want to work for a JR Group production because they're like, oh, they treat their people well. Feed them if you can. Um, yeah, yeah. What else is on this list? I want to move quickly because I feel like we've been yapping for a while, but I also feel like this is good. Oh, when you're doing a tour, be aware of the calendar. And I know that sounds very simple, but it was a spring tour because it was the garden. So I knew we shouldn't do anything around Easter, like the week before or after, because that's Palm Sunday and then Easter Sunday, which means people were probably prepared. It's a Christian show, so people were going to be at church or preparing for church or whatever the case is, right? But in addition to that, flights are also more because it's spring break. What I did not know is that the Dallas show was the weekend of the solar eclipse. I didn't think that was going to be that big of a deal. Turns out, Dallas was in the line of the path of whatever it was called. Dallas was in that line, so people were coming into town in droves to see it. So that meant there were no rental cars. Ubers were so hard to find. Hotels were very expensive. I did not know that. I did not. That messed up our budget a little bit, but it was okay because DC, we did well in DC and Atlanta. We had somewhere to stay as well. So like, just be aware of what's happening. Dreamville was also that weekend, and while that was all the way in North Carolina, people were using rental cars to go to the show. There was a rodeo in Houston, so everybody in Houston was already got tickets for the rodeo. Some black person was performing, so the black people were excited. So they were not looking for Jasmine's show. I think that's really it. Um, I'm gonna talk about tours a lot, so I don't have to hit everything now for this particular video. But Jasmine, if you ever watch this video, I just want to say thank you again. I know I told you many times before, but thank you for letting me help be the tour manager and kind of help be a producer for your show. Your very first solo tour, you didn't have to use me, and I'm glad you did. I had a great time. Hope we get to do it again for sure. And y'all, I want to encourage you at the end of this video, like, launch out and do something. Like, don't be afraid of the uncertainty to don't let uncertainty prevent you from doing what you are certain that you should do. Ooh, that's good. I need to quote that. Don't let uncertainty prevent you from doing what you are certain that you need to do. That's a good way to end that video right there. Anyway, like, comment, share, subscribe, hit that smash button, like the kids say, do all the things. This is what had happened was featuring the Jasmine Sims live, the garden experience. I think that's what it was called.